Completing the square. Solve the equation by completing the square. Now, I know for some of you, you've seen some huge equations, and you do this and you do that, and you have A's, B's, C's everywhere. Well, I'm going to show you how I do it, okay? First thing I do is I want to get 15 on the other side. So I'm going to add 15 to both sides of the equation. Now, when I rewrite this, I'm going to write w squared plus 2w, but I'm going to leave a big space here, equals 15. My next step is I actually make my squared part, okay? Now to figure out this number, you take this and divide it by 2. What I mean is you take 2 divided by 2, which is 1, and that goes here. It's a positive 1. If this was a negative 2 divided by 2 would be a negative 1, and that's what would go here, but it's not. My next step is to take this number, which happens to be 1, and square it. That means I'm going to take 1 and square it, which is 1. That's what goes here. Okay? Now, remember, I need to keep both sides of my equation balanced. So if I add 1 here, I have to add 1 there. So that gives me 16. Now I want to solve it. Okay? So I rewrite it. W plus 1 squared equals 16. And how you do that is you take the square root of both sides. So this side becomes w plus 1 equals, now the square root of 16 is plus or minus 4, okay? Now I want to get w by itself, so I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides of the equation, just like we do in any other solving. So w equals negative 1 plus or minus 4. Well, now that's going to give me 2 answers, and I'm going to write it up here for you. So w equals negative 1 plus 4, and w equals negative 1 minus 4. So negative 1 plus 4 is 3, negative 1 minus 4 is negative 5. And you just did solve the equation by completing the square. Let's do this one. Well, this one, it already has the 6 on the right side. But remember, I need to rewrite this so that I have a little space in there. Little space there. Then I rewrite my square. Now I look at this number and I divide that number by 2, or I half it. What I'm doing is taking 2 divided by 2, which is 1, and that number goes here. Now to get the number that goes here, I just take 1 squared. 1 squared, which is 1. Now remember, if I add anything to this side, I have to add it to the other side, okay? So that gives me 7. So now I'm just going to solve. I'm going to rewrite it here, and then take the square root of both sides. So that will give me z plus 1 equals, now I can't reduce the square root of 7, so we're just going to call it plus or minus the square root of 7. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides of the equation. So z equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 7. Now some instructors might want you to actually write both of them out. So what you'll have is z equals negative 1 plus the square root of 7, and z equals negative 1 minus the square root of 7. Let's look at another one. Now this time I have something here and something here, okay? But remember, I only want h squared minus 5h on this side. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides of the equation. Now remember, I'm going to rewrite this with a big space. H squared minus 5h equals negative 4. Okay. Then I'm going to write h and a squared. Now remember, I take half of this number, okay? So negative 5 divided by 2 just happens to be negative 5 halves. So that's what's going to go here, negative 5 halves. Now I take that number and square it, okay? So I take negative 5 halves and square it. So that means negative 5 halves times negative 5 halves, which turns out to be 25 fourths. So that's what goes here, 25 fourths. Now if I do anything to this side, I have to do it to this side. Okay. So now this part, to add fractions, I need a common denominator. So I'm just going to do this up here for you. My common denominator is going to be 4. So this is actually negative 16 over 4. I just multiplied by 4 on the top and 4 on the bottom, plus 25 over 4, which is this guy. When I add them together, I get 9/4. So that's what goes here, 9/4. So let me rewrite this so you can see it a little better. H minus 5/2 squared equals 9/4. Now once again, just like before, take the square root of both sides. So h minus 5/2 equals the square root of 9/4. We could say that's the square root of 9 over the square root of 4. That would equal plus or minus 3 over 2. The square root of 9 is 3, the square root of 4 is 2. Plus or minus. Okay, now we're just down to figure out the two answers. So I'm going to add 5/2 to both sides here. So I'm going to have h equals 5/2 plus or minus 3/2. So I'm going to have h equals 5/2 plus 3/2, and h equals 5/2 minus 3/2. So remember, we add the top, which is 8/2, which turns out to be 4. That's one of our answers. 5 minus 3 is 2. 2/2, which equals 1, and that's my other answer. And let's